Innovation was never supposed to hurt this much. I learned that lesson the hard way when my best friend of 15 years took the business concept I'd shared with her in confidence and turned it into her own million-dollar empire, leaving me to watch from the sidelines as my dreams became her reality. The idea came to me during one of those ordinary moments that later feel like they should have been marked with cosmic significance. I was standing in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, struggling to prepare a healthy breakfast while juggling a conference call, when I knocked over my coffee mug and watched expensive organic almond milk spread across my counter. As I cleaned up the mess, frustrated by the waste and the time lost from my already packed morning routine, a solution crystallized in my mind with startling clarity. What if there was a service that delivered perfectly portioned, customizable meal components directly to busy professionals? Not another meal kit company with complicated recipes and excessive packaging, but something simpler and more flexible. Pre-prepared, high-quality ingredients that could be mixed and matched according to dietary preferences, schedule constraints, and nutritional goals. Protein portions, grain bases, vegetable selections, and healthy fats that could be combined in endless ways, delivered fresh and ready to eat with minimal preparation time. I spent the rest of that morning sketching out the concept, my mind racing with possibilities. The market research I'd been doing in my spare time for months suddenly had a focal point. I'd been studying the intersection of convenience food and health consciousness, analyzing the gaps between what busy professionals needed and what existing services provided. This idea felt like the missing piece that could bridge those gaps in a meaningful way. The timing felt perfect in ways that seemed almost predestined. I'd recently completed my MBA with a focus on entrepreneurship and supply chain management. I'd spent 3 years working in operations for a food distribution company, learning the intricacies of sourcing, logistics, and quality control. I'd built relationships with local farms and specialty food producers through my previous job. Most importantly, I'd been saving money, specifically to fund my own business venture, living frugally and building a nest egg that could support the initial stages of a startup. But I also knew that entrepreneurship was a lonely and risky journey, one that would be much easier to navigate with the support of someone who understood both my vision and my capabilities. That's why I decided to share my idea with Maya, my closest friend since college, and someone whose opinion I valued more than almost anyone else's. Maya and I had been inseparable since our sophomore year at Northwestern, when we'd been randomly assigned as roommates and discovered an immediate compatibility that transcended our different backgrounds and career aspirations. She was studying marketing and communications while I focused on business operations, and we'd often joked about how our complementary skills would make us perfect business partners someday. Our friendship had survived everything that typically destroys college relationships: different majors, competing social circles, romantic drama, post-graduation geographic separation, and the natural evolution that comes with entering the working world. We'd maintained weekly phone calls for over a decade, shared each other's professional triumphs and disappointments, and celebrated major life milestones together despite living in different cities. Maya had always been the more charismatic of the two of us, blessed with the kind of natural magnetism that made people want to follow her lead. She could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with half a dozen new business cards and invitations to exclusive events. Her career in marketing had flourished because she understood instinctively how to connect with people, how to make them feel seen and understood and excited about whatever she was promoting. I, on the other hand, was the detail-oriented one, the person who could take Maya's big-picture vision and figure out exactly how to make it happen. I was comfortable with spreadsheets and logistics chains and regulatory requirements, all the unglamorous back-end work that turned creative ideas into functioning businesses. We'd always acknowledged that our different strengths made us a formidable team when we collaborated on projects. So when I called Maya that Tuesday evening to share my meal delivery concept, I wasn't just looking for feedback from a friend. I was unconsciously auditioning her as a potential business partner, imagining how her marketing expertise could complement my operational knowledge to create something neither of us could achieve alone. Maya's reaction exceeded my most optimistic expectations. She was immediately and enthusiastically supportive, asking detailed questions about target demographics, pricing models, and competitive positioning that demonstrated both genuine interest and sophisticated business thinking. She helped me refine the concept during our 2-hour conversation, suggesting modifications that made the service more appealing to different market segments. More importantly, she offered to help me develop the idea further. Maya had recently been promoted to senior marketing manager at her agency and had access to resources that could be invaluable for market research and brand development. She suggested that we spend the weekend together, working through a comprehensive business plan that could serve as the foundation for seeking investors or applying for small business loans. I was thrilled by her enthusiasm and grateful for her offer to collaborate. The prospect of building this business with my best friend felt like a dream scenario, combining professional partnership with personal trust in ways that could create something truly special. I booked a flight to Chicago for the following weekend, my mind already racing with plans and possibilities. That weekend was one of the most productive and exciting periods of my adult life. Maya and I worked with an intensity and focus that reminded me of our college days, when we'd stay up all night working on projects that mattered to us. We researched market sizes, analyzed competitor weaknesses, developed customer personas, and created detailed financial projections that made the business concept feel increasingly viable and profitable. Maya's marketing insights were invaluable in ways I hadn't anticipated. She helped me understand how to position the service not just as a convenient solution, but as a lifestyle brand that represented health, success, and intentional living. She suggested targeting specific demographic segments that I hadn't considered, identified potential partnership opportunities with fitness studios and corporate wellness programs, and developed messaging strategies that would differentiate our offering from existing meal delivery services. We spent hours refining the business model, working through operational challenges, and exploring different revenue streams. Maya suggested a subscription tier system that would allow customers to customize their level of service based on their budget and commitment level. She proposed a corporate partnership program that could provide steady revenue while building brand awareness among our target demographic. She even sketched out a social media strategy that would leverage user-generated content to build community around the brand. By Sunday evening, we had a comprehensive business plan that felt both ambitious and achievable. The financial projections showed a clear path to profitability within 18 months, assuming we could secure adequate initial funding and execute our growth strategy effectively. The market research suggested significant demand for exactly the kind of service we were proposing. Most importantly, we'd identified a sustainable competitive advantage based on our focus on customization and quality rather than just convenience. As I prepared to fly home, Maya and I made plans to continue developing the concept remotely. She would focus on brand development and marketing strategy, while I worked on operational planning and supplier relationships. We agreed to meet again in a month to finalize our business plan and begin the process of seeking funding. I returned home energized and optimistic in ways I hadn't felt since graduating from business school. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving toward something I genuinely wanted rather than just responding to external expectations and opportunities. The meal delivery service felt like more than a business idea. It was a chance to create something meaningful that could improve people's lives while building the kind of career I'd always imagined for myself. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the operational planning with obsessive dedication. The depth of research required was both exhilarating and overwhelming, but every detail I uncovered made the business feel more real and more achievable. I spent entire evenings researching commercial kitchen requirements and food safety regulations, learning about HACCP protocols, understanding the complexities of FDA compliance, and investigating the licensing requirements for food service businesses in different states. The regulatory landscape was more complex than I'd anticipated, but I was determined to understand every requirement before we launched. I developed relationships with local farms and specialty food producers who could supply the high-quality ingredients our service would require. This meant visiting farmers markets on weekends, scheduling tours of organic farms outside the city, and having detailed conversations with producers about their capacity, quality standards, and pricing structures. One particularly memorable visit was to Green Valley Farm, about an hour outside the city, where I met with Sarah and Mike Rodriguez, a couple who'd been growing organic vegetables for 15 years. They walked me through their operation, from seed selection to harvest timing, explaining how they could provide consistent quality and quantity for a service like ours. Their passion for sustainable agriculture and commitment to quality aligned perfectly with our brand vision. I also connected with Mountain View Poultry, a small-scale operation that raised free-range chickens and turkeys using regenerative farming practices. The owner, David Chen, had an MBA in addition to his farming background and understood the needs of businesses like the one Maya and I were planning. He was willing to work with us on custom portioning and packaging that would meet our specific requirements. For seafood sourcing, I established relationships with 2 different suppliers, one that focused on wild-caught fish from sustainable fisheries, and another that specialized in responsibly farmed shellfish. Both were more expensive than conventional suppliers, but the quality difference was obvious, and I knew our target customers would appreciate the commitment to environmental responsibility. I investigated packaging solutions that would maintain freshness while minimizing environmental impact. This research led me to discover innovative packaging materials made from agricultural waste, biodegradable containers that could maintain temperature control during shipping, and reusable cooling systems that customers could return for cleaning and reuse. The packaging challenge was more complex than I'd initially realized. We needed solutions that would keep different types of ingredients at optimal temperatures during transit, prevent cross-contamination between proteins and vegetables, maintain visual appeal for social media-savvy customers, and align with our environmental values. After weeks of research and testing, I identified a packaging system that met all these requirements while remaining cost-effective at scale. I also began working on the financial aspects of launching the business. I calculated startup costs, researched funding options, and even had preliminary conversations with a few investors who'd expressed interest in food service startups. The numbers were daunting but manageable, especially if Maya and I could pool our resources and share the initial financial burden. The financial modeling required me to estimate costs for everything from commercial kitchen rental to delivery vehicle leases to insurance premiums. I created detailed spreadsheets that projected cash flow for the first 3 years of operation, modeling different growth scenarios and identifying the key metrics that would determine our success or failure. Initial startup costs came to approximately $250,000, which would cover kitchen setup, initial inventory, packaging materials, delivery infrastructure, technology development, marketing launch, and operating expenses for the first 6 months. This amount was significant but not overwhelming, especially compared to other food service startups I'd researched. I identified several potential funding sources, including small business loans, angel investors who specialized in food service ventures, and even a few venture capital firms that had shown interest in companies serving the health-conscious professional market. I also researched government programs that supported small business development and discovered several grant opportunities for women-owned businesses in the food service sector. My personal savings could cover about 30% of the initial costs, and I'd assumed that Maya would contribute a similar amount based on our conversations about shared investment. The remaining 40% would need to come from external funding, which seemed achievable given the strength of our business plan and the growing investor interest in food service innovation. I even had preliminary conversations with 3 different investors who'd been introduced to me through my professional network. Each conversation had gone well, with investors expressing genuine interest in the concept and requesting detailed business plans for formal review. Their feedback had been consistently positive, particularly regarding our focus on customization and quality over pure convenience. One investor, Rebecca Martinez from Sustainable Ventures, had been particularly enthusiastic about our environmental focus and the potential for scaling the business model to multiple markets. She'd suggested that our concept filled a genuine gap in the market and had the potential to achieve the kind of growth that her fund looked for in portfolio companies. Another investor, James Liu from Food Tech Capital, had praised our operational planning and suggested that our background in supply chain management gave us a significant advantage over other food service startups. He'd seen too many companies fail because they underestimated the complexities of food sourcing and logistics, and he appreciated that we'd done extensive research into these operational challenges. The third investor, Maria Santos from Women's Enterprise Fund, had been interested in our target demographic and marketing strategy. She'd noted that professional women were an underserved market in the meal delivery space and that our approach to customization and quality could capture significant market share if executed properly. Meanwhile, Maya was developing the brand identity and marketing strategy with her characteristic creativity and attention to detail. She sent me logo concepts, color palettes, and messaging frameworks that perfectly captured the vision we'd developed together. She created detailed customer journey maps that showed how we could acquire and retain subscribers through a combination of digital marketing, referral programs, and strategic partnerships. Our weekly check-in calls were highlights of my week, opportunities to share progress and problem-solve challenges together. Maya's enthusiasm for the project never wavered, and her contributions continued to strengthen and refine our business concept. I felt incredibly fortunate to have a partner whose skills complemented mine so perfectly and whose commitment to our shared vision seemed as strong as my own. About 6 weeks after our initial planning weekend, Maya called with news that initially seemed like a tremendous opportunity. Her agency had been approached by a client who was interested in investing in food service startups, and Maya had mentioned our concept during a casual conversation. The potential investor wanted to hear more about our business plan and was interested in setting up a meeting to discuss funding possibilities. I was excited by this development, but also slightly nervous about presenting our concept before we'd finalized all the operational details. Maya assured me that the investor was just interested in a preliminary overview, nothing that would require comprehensive documentation or formal presentations. She suggested that I send her our latest business plan materials so she could prepare talking points for the initial conversation. I compiled everything we developed over the past month and a half: market research, financial projections, operational plans, branding concepts, competitive analysis, and growth strategies. It represented hundreds of hours of work and thousands of dollars in research and development costs. I trusted Maya completely, so I shared it all without hesitation, confident that she would represent our partnership accurately and professionally. The next few weeks passed without much communication from Maya, which wasn't unusual given her demanding work schedule and the complexity of coordinating investor meetings. When I called to check on the progress, she explained that the potential investor was still reviewing our materials and would likely want to schedule a formal presentation within the next month. I continued working on operational planning, focusing on the aspects of the business that would need to be finalized before we could launch. I secured preliminary agreements with suppliers, researched kitchen facility rental options, and even began developing relationships with potential early customers through my personal and professional networks. It was during this period that I started noticing subtle changes in Maya's communication patterns. Our weekly calls became less frequent and more rushed. When we did talk, she seemed distracted and less engaged with the planning details that had previously excited her. She explained these changes as symptoms of increased pressure at her day job, and I accepted her explanations without question. The first real warning sign came when I discovered that Maya had filed for a business license under a name very similar to the one we'd developed together for our meal delivery service. I found this information accidentally while doing competitive research, searching for other companies that might be operating in our target market. When I called Maya to ask about the business license, she explained that she'd filed it as a precautionary measure to protect our intellectual property while we continued developing the concept. She said her business attorney had recommended securing the legal framework early in the process, especially given the potential investor interest. Her explanation seemed reasonable, and I was grateful that she was being proactive about legal protections. But over the next few weeks, I began noticing other concerning developments. Social media posts from Maya showed her attending food industry events and networking meetings that she hadn't mentioned to me. When I asked about these activities, she explained that she was doing research and relationship building on behalf of our partnership. But something about her responses felt evasive and incomplete. The truth began to emerge when I received a text message from a mutual friend congratulating me on the successful launch of my meal delivery service. The message included a link to a local news article about innovative food startups, featuring a company with a name almost identical to our original concept and a business model that was unmistakably based on the plan Maya and I had developed together. The article described Maya as the founder and CEO of this new venture, highlighting her marketing background and vision for revolutionizing how busy professionals approached healthy eating. The journalist had clearly been impressed by Maya's presentation, describing her as an innovative entrepreneur who had identified a significant gap in the meal delivery market and developed a unique solution to address it. There was no mention of a business partner or collaborator, no acknowledgement of months of joint planning or shared development. The service description, target demographic, pricing model, and even the specific language used to describe the concept were virtually identical to what we developed during our planning sessions. The article quoted Maya extensively, and reading her words felt like listening to recordings of our brainstorming conversations with her voice substituted for mine. She described the eureka moment when the idea first occurred to her, the exact scenario I'd shared with her about spilling coffee while trying to prepare breakfast. She explained the market research that had validated the concept, research we'd conducted together during late-night video calls and weekend work sessions. Most painfully, Maya had appropriated even the specific details that made our concept unique. She described the customizable meal component system, the focus on locally sourced ingredients, the sustainable packaging solutions, the subscription tier structure, all innovations that had emerged from our collaborative planning process. She'd taken not just the broad concept, but every nuance and refinement that had made our business plan distinctive and compelling. The article included quotes from the investor who'd funded Maya's venture, the same investor she'd claimed was interested in our partnership. He praised Maya's business acumen and operational expertise, noting that her background in supply chain management made her uniquely qualified to execute this type of food service concept. He was referring to knowledge and experience that I'd shared with Maya during our planning sessions, insights from my previous job in food distribution that she'd incorporated into her pitch as if they were her own. I read the article 3 times, each reading making the betrayal more real and more devastating. Maya had taken our shared concept, our months of collaborative planning, our joint vision for the future, and claimed it entirely as her own creation. She'd used the investor contact that had supposedly been interested in our partnership to fund her solo venture. She'd filed the business license, not to protect our intellectual property, but to establish her exclusive ownership of our idea. But the theft went deeper than just the business concept. Maya had stolen my story, my personal journey of discovering entrepreneurial passion, my specific experiences and insights from years of working in food distribution. She'd appropriated my relationships with suppliers, my understanding of regulatory requirements, my vision for sustainable business practices. She'd taken pieces of my identity and professional history and woven them into a narrative that positioned her as the sole creative force behind the venture. The article also revealed details about Maya's company that I hadn't known. She'd secured significant funding, more than the $250,000 we'd estimated would be necessary for launch. She'd hired a team of operations specialists, marketing professionals, and culinary experts. She'd already begun pilot testing in 2 major markets and was planning national expansion within 18 months. Reading about the scale and sophistication of her operation was devastating because it proved that our original concept had been even more viable than we'd realized. Maya hadn't just stolen a good idea. She'd stolen an idea that was capable of generating the kind of business success that could have transformed both our lives. The financial projections we developed together had actually been conservative compared to what she was achieving. The article mentioned that Maya's company had already attracted interest from major investors for a series of funding round that could value the business at over $10 million. She was being featured in industry publications as one of the most promising food service entrepreneurs of the year. She'd been invited to speak at conferences about innovation and women in business. She was building exactly the kind of career and reputation that I dreamed of achieving through our partnership. The most infuriating aspect of the article was how it portrayed Maya's success as the result of her individual vision and determination. The journalist described her as someone who'd identified a market opportunity through careful observation and had the courage to pursue it despite the risks involved. There was no hint that the concept had emerged from collaborative brainstorming or that the business plan had been developed through partnership with someone else. Maya had not only stolen my idea, she'd stolen credit for the very qualities that had made the idea successful. My analytical thinking, my operational expertise, my relationship-building skills, my attention to detail, all the capabilities that had contributed to our business plan were now being attributed to her individual brilliance and entrepreneurial instinct. The phone call I made to Maya that evening was one of the most difficult conversations of my adult life. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, to find some explanation that would preserve our friendship and our planned partnership. Maybe there had been a miscommunication with the journalist. Maybe the business she'd launched was meant to be a pilot program for our larger concept. Maybe she'd been trying to protect our idea from competitors and had gotten carried away with the execution. But Maya's response eliminated any possibility of innocent misunderstanding. She was defensive and dismissive, treating my concerns as unreasonable and my expectations as naive. She explained that the investor had wanted to move quickly and hadn't been interested in partnerships with inexperienced entrepreneurs. She'd made the decision to proceed independently because she believed it was the best way to bring our concept to market successfully. When I pointed out that the concept had been my original idea and that we'd developed the business plan as equal partners, Maya's response revealed the depth of her betrayal and the callousness of her calculations. She suggested that I was overestimating my contributions to the project and underestimating the challenges of actually executing the business plan. She implied that I lacked the experience and connections necessary to make the venture successful, and that her decision to proceed alone had probably saved us both from an expensive failure. Then came the words that would haunt me for months afterward. You never would have made it work anyway. The dismissiveness of that statement was breathtaking. Maya had taken my idea, used my research and planning, benefited from my industry knowledge and supplier relationships, and then suggested that I was incapable of executing the very concept I'd created. She'd rewritten our collaborative history to position herself as the visionary and me as the incompetent partner she'd had to abandon for the good of the business. The conversation ended with Maya suggesting that I should be happy for her success and proud that our brainstorming sessions had contributed to something meaningful, even if I wasn't directly involved in the execution. She seemed genuinely puzzled by my anger and hurt, as if she couldn't understand why I would object to her appropriation of our shared work. The aftermath of that conversation was emotionally devastating in ways that surprised me with their intensity. I'd been betrayed by romantic partners before, disappointed by colleagues and employers, hurt by family members who'd failed to support my dreams. But this betrayal felt different because it attacked both my professional aspirations and my personal relationships simultaneously. Maya hadn't just stolen my business idea. She'd stolen my future as I'd envisioned it, my plans for financial independence and creative fulfillment. But more than that, she destroyed my trust in one of the most important relationships in my life, revealing that someone I'd considered a sister was capable of calculated deception and casual cruelty. The business she'd launched using our concept was indeed successful, growing rapidly and attracting exactly the kind of media attention and investor interest we predicted during our planning sessions. Watching Maya's venture thrive while I remained stuck in my corporate job felt like a daily reminder of what I'd lost and what might have been. But the success of her business also confirmed something important. My original idea had been viable and valuable. The market research we'd done together had been accurate. The business model we'd developed had been sound. The problem hadn't been with the concept or the planning. It had been with my choice of partner and my naive trust in someone who was willing to prioritize her own advancement over a friendship and collaboration. This realization sparked a transformation in how I approached both business and relationships going forward. I couldn't reclaim my stolen idea, but I could learn from the experience and use those lessons to create something even better. I began developing a new business concept, one that built on the knowledge and experience I'd gained from the meal delivery project, but took a completely different approach to the market. Instead of focusing on individual consumers, I decided to target corporate wellness programs, offering customized nutrition services for companies that wanted to support their employees' health and productivity. The idea emerged from conversations I'd had with former colleagues who worked at large corporations struggling with employee wellness initiatives. Many companies wanted to offer meaningful health benefits beyond basic insurance coverage, but they lacked the expertise to design and implement effective nutrition programs. Most existing corporate wellness solutions focused on fitness facilities or health screenings, with very few addressing the fundamental issue of workplace nutrition. I envisioned a service that would provide companies with on-site nutrition consulting, customized meal programs for office environments, educational workshops about healthy eating, and ongoing support for employees trying to improve their dietary habits. Unlike the individual meal delivery service Maya had stolen, this concept would focus on group programs and workplace integration, creating a completely different value proposition and customer relationship. The market research I conducted for this new venture was even more thorough than what Maya and I had done together for the original meal delivery concept. I spent months interviewing HR directors, wellness coordinators, and corporate benefits administrators to understand their challenges and priorities. I surveyed employees at different types of companies about their workplace eating habits and interest in nutrition support. What I discovered was a massive underserved market. Companies were spending billions of dollars on employee wellness programs, but most employees reported that these programs didn't meaningfully impact their daily health choices. The disconnect was particularly pronounced around nutrition. While companies might provide gym memberships or health screenings, they rarely addressed the reality that most employees ate lunch at their desks and relied on vending machines and fast food for workplace nutrition. My proposed solution was comprehensive and scalable. For large corporations, we would provide on-site nutrition specialists who could offer individual consultations, group workshops, and cafeteria menu planning. For medium-sized companies, we would offer customized meal delivery programs designed specifically for office environments, with family-style portions that could serve groups and educational materials that promoted healthy workplace eating culture. For smaller companies, we would provide digital nutrition coaching platforms paired with group meal programs that could be shared among employees. The beauty of this approach was that it could be customized for companies of any size and adapted to different workplace cultures and budget constraints. This new concept leveraged my operational expertise and industry relationships while avoiding direct competition with Maya's venture. The suppliers I'd cultivated for the original meal delivery concept were actually better suited for corporate programs, which required larger quantities and more predictable ordering patterns. The packaging solutions I'd researched could be modified for group servings rather than individual portions. Even the financial projections I developed could be adapted for the B2B market dynamics. It also addressed market segments that she hadn't explored, creating opportunities for growth and differentiation that didn't depend on displacing her existing business. The corporate wellness market was enormous and growing rapidly, driven by companies' increasing recognition that employee health directly impacted productivity, retention, and healthcare costs. The development process for this new venture was methodical and comprehensive in ways that reflected everything I'd learned from Maya's Betrayal. I worked with a business attorney from the earliest stages of concept development to ensure that all intellectual property was properly protected. I filed provisional patents for the unique aspects of my service delivery model. I required confidentiality agreements from anyone who had access to sensitive information about the business plan. I also built a team of advisors and consultants based on professional qualifications and proven track records, rather than personal relationships. This included a nutritionist who specialized in corporate wellness programs, a technology consultant who understood enterprise software requirements, a marketing specialist who focused on B2B services, and a financial advisor who had experience with service-based startups. Most importantly, I learned to trust my own judgment and capabilities in ways that I hadn't before. The experience with Maya had initially undermined my confidence, making me question whether I really had the skills and vision necessary to build a successful business. But as I worked through the development of my new concept independently, I discovered that I was more capable than I'd given myself credit for. The corporate wellness nutrition service concept was more complex than my original meal delivery idea, but it was also more defensible and potentially more profitable. Corporate contracts provided predictable revenue streams that individual subscriptions couldn't match. The B2B sales process was longer but resulted in larger deals with lower customer acquisition costs. The service differentiation was based on expertise and relationships rather than just convenience, creating natural barriers to competitive entry. I spent 6 months developing a comprehensive business plan that addressed every aspect of the venture from regulatory compliance to technology infrastructure. I created detailed financial models that projected revenue and profitability under different growth scenarios. I developed marketing materials that clearly articulated our value proposition and competitive advantages. The fundraising process was also different this time. Instead of relying on personal relationships or casual introductions, I systematically identified investors who specialized in B2B services and corporate wellness solutions. I prepared a professional pitch deck that highlighted market opportunity, competitive advantages, management team qualifications, and financial projections in the kind of detail that sophisticated investors expected. I also bootstrapped the early stages of the business using my own savings and revenue from consulting projects with companies that wanted to pilot elements of our service model. This approach allowed me to validate key assumptions about customer demand and service delivery before seeking significant external funding. The development process for this new venture was very different from my collaboration with Maya. I worked with a business attorney to protect my intellectual property from the earliest stages of planning. I signed confidentiality agreements with anyone who had access to sensitive information about the concept. I built a team of advisors and consultants based on professional qualifications rather than personal relationships. Most importantly, I learned to trust my own judgment and capabilities in ways that I hadn't before. The experience with Maya had initially undermined my confidence, making me question whether I really had the skills and vision necessary to build a successful business. But as I worked through the development of my new concept independently, I discovered that I was more capable than I'd given myself credit for. The corporate wellness nutrition service launched 18 months after Maya's Betrayal, with funding from investors who were impressed by my industry knowledge, operational planning, and clear vision for market growth. The business model was more complex than my original meal delivery concept, but it was also more defensible and scalable with multiple revenue streams and natural barriers to competitive entry. Within 2 years, my company had secured contracts with major corporations and was generating revenue that exceeded my most optimistic projections from the original meal delivery plan. We'd built a team of nutritionists, chefs, and logistics specialists who shared my commitment to quality and customer service. We developed proprietary technology that made our service more efficient and effective than anything our competitors offered. The success of my venture attracted media attention that inevitably led to comparisons with Maya's company. Journalists who covered the food service industry began noting the similarities between our original concepts and speculating about the relationship between our two businesses. Some even investigated the timeline of our respective launches and raised questions about intellectual property and professional ethics. I never spoke publicly about Maya's theft of my original idea, choosing instead to focus on the unique value proposition and market opportunity that my current business represented. But the industry coverage made it clear that people were drawing their own conclusions about the origins of our respective concepts and the circumstances that had led to our separate ventures. Maya reached out to me once during this period, ostensibly to congratulate me on my business success, but really to gauge whether I intended to make our history public. I kept the conversation brief and professional, making it clear that I was focused on growing my own company rather than relitigating past grievances. But I also made it clear that I remembered exactly what had happened between us and that I would never again be vulnerable to the kind of betrayal she had inflicted. The friendship we'd shared for 15 years was permanently over, not because I couldn't forgive her theft of my idea, but because I couldn't trust someone who'd proven capable of such calculated deception. The experience taught me valuable lessons about entrepreneurship that went far beyond market research and business planning. I learned that intellectual property protection is crucial from the earliest stages of concept development, not just as a legal safeguard, but as a psychological protection against the kind of betrayal I'd experienced. I discovered that professional relationships require different kinds of trust and verification than personal friendships, and that mixing the two without clear boundaries and legal protections is a recipe for disaster. Most importantly, I understood that my own capabilities and judgment were more reliable than I had previously believed. Maya's betrayal had initially made me question everything about my business instincts and entrepreneurial potential. But building a successful company independently had proven that I possessed all the skills necessary for business success. I just needed to learn to trust them and protect them appropriately. The process of developing my corporate wellness venture had also taught me about the importance of building systems and processes that could function without depending on any single person or relationship. Maya's departure from our original partnership had been devastating partly because I'd structured our collaboration in ways that made her contributions irreplaceable. My new business was designed with redundancy and protection built into every aspect of operations. I created detailed operational manuals that documented every process and procedure, ensuring that key knowledge wasn't concentrated in any individual team member. I developed relationships with multiple suppliers for every critical input, preventing single points of failure in our supply chain. I built financial systems that provided transparency and accountability at every level of the organization. I also learned to value and prioritize the people who had supported me throughout the betrayal and recovery process. My business attorney, who'd helped me protect my intellectual property and navigate the legal complexities of starting a new venture, became a trusted advisor whose counsel I sought on all major business decisions. The consultants and advisors I'd recruited based on professional qualifications proved to be invaluable resources whose expertise continued to strengthen the business long after launch. Even my former colleagues from the food distribution industry, who'd introduced me to potential customers and provided references during the early stages of business development, became part of an extended professional network that supported the company's growth in ways that went far beyond their initial contributions. Maya's dismissive comment about my inability to make the business work had been intended to justify her theft and minimize her betrayal, but it had also revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of what entrepreneurship requires. Success in business isn't just about having good ideas or strong connections. It's about persistence, adaptability, and the willingness to learn from failure and setback. Maya had been able to execute our original meal delivery concept successfully because she'd built on months of planning and research that we'd done together. She'd had access to all the supplier relationships I'd developed, all the market research we'd conducted, all the operational knowledge I'd gained through years of experience in food distribution. In many ways, She'd had a significant head start that made her initial success less impressive than it appeared. My corporate wellness venture, by contrast, was built entirely from my own efforts and insights. Every supplier relationship, every customer connection, every operational innovation was something I developed through my own work and judgment. The success of this business was a more accurate reflection of my actual capabilities as an entrepreneur. The financial success was also more meaningful because it was entirely mine. When my company achieved profitability within its first year of operation, when we secured major contracts with Fortune 500 companies, when we began expanding into new markets and service lines, I knew that every achievement was the result of my own vision and execution rather than collaborative efforts that had been appropriated by someone else. But perhaps the most satisfying aspect of my business success was the way it validated my original instincts about the meal delivery market. Maya's company, while initially successful, had begun to face increasing competition from larger players with more resources and broader market reach. The individual consumer meal delivery space had become crowded and commoditized in ways that made sustained profitability difficult. My corporate wellness venture, meanwhile, operated in a market with higher barriers to entry and more defensible competitive advantages. Our success was based on expertise and relationships that couldn't easily be replicated by competitors, and our growth was supported by long-term contracts that provided predictable revenue streams. The irony wasn't lost on me that Maya's theft of my original idea had actually forced me to develop a better business concept. If she hadn't betrayed our partnership, I might have spent years building a meal delivery service that eventually struggled against well-funded competitors. Instead, I'd been pushed to create a venture that was more innovative, more profitable, and more sustainable than anything we could have built together. The success of my corporate wellness company also attracted attention from the same investors who'd funded Maya's venture. Several of them reached out to discuss potential partnerships or expansion opportunities, and their interest validated both my business model and my capabilities as an entrepreneur. The recognition felt particularly sweet, given that these were the same people who'd supposedly been uninterested in working with inexperienced entrepreneurs like me. One investor who'd originally funded Maya's company even apologized for not giving proper consideration to our original partnership proposal. He'd since learned more about the development history of Maya's concept and understood that his decision to work exclusively with her had been based on incomplete information about the true origins of the business plan. My original meal delivery concept had been a good idea that Maya was able to execute successfully using the planning and research we developed together. But my corporate wellness venture was a better idea that I developed entirely through my own efforts, informed by hard-won experience and protected by legal safeguards that reflected my newfound sophistication about business relationships. The financial success of my company was gratifying, but the personal growth that came from overcoming Maya's betrayal was even more valuable. I'd learned to trust my own vision while protecting it from those who might exploit that trust. I'd discovered that setbacks and betrayals, while painful, could also be sources of wisdom and strength that made future success more likely and more meaningful. 3 years after Maya stole my idea and launched her version of our meal delivery service, I was running a larger, more profitable business that served a market she'd never even considered. Her venture was still successful, but it had plateaued in ways that suggested limited growth potential. My company, meanwhile, was expanding into new markets and developing additional service lines that promised continued growth for years to come. The irony wasn't lost on me that Maya's betrayal had ultimately led to better outcomes than our original partnership might have achieved. If she hadn't stolen my idea, I might have spent years tied to a business model that was good but not great, working with a partner I couldn't fully trust in an industry with significant competitive pressures. Instead, I'd been forced to develop something better, something that was entirely my own creation and reflected my actual capabilities rather than my willingness to compromise and collaborate. Maya had thought she was stealing my future when she took my idea. In reality, she'd freed me to create a future that was bigger and better than anything we could have built together. The lesson I took from this experience wasn't that friendship and business don't mix, but that both require careful attention to character and values. Maya's willingness to betray our personal relationship for professional advantage had revealed something fundamental about her character that I'd been blind to for 15 years. A real friend would have found ways to support my entrepreneurial dreams while pursuing her own career goals. A trustworthy business partner would have honored our collaboration and shared credit for our joint achievements. Maya had proven herself to be neither, and recognizing this truth, while painful, had ultimately protected me from even greater losses down the road. Today, when young entrepreneurs ask me for advice about starting their own ventures, I always emphasize the importance of protecting intellectual property and choosing partners based on demonstrated character rather than personal affection. I tell them about the necessity of legal safeguards and the value of independent validation for business concepts. But I also tell them that betrayal and setbacks, while devastating in the moment, can become sources of strength and wisdom that make future success more likely and more satisfying. Maya thought she was stealing my opportunity when she took my idea and dismissed my capabilities. Instead, she gave me the motivation and knowledge I needed to build something much better than either of us had originally imagined. The idea that was stolen became the foundation for something stronger, more valuable, and entirely my own. And in the end, that transformation was worth far more than the original concept Maya had taken from me.